Peace be upon you all. Those who hijacked the message of Islam immediately after the death of Muhammad succeeded in misleading the people and making them believe the Quran is just a book that summarizes the practice of Islam, and it requires that one also obey the Hadith to get the details. The so-called traditional Muslim scholars have wired the brains of their followers to believe that anyone who follows the Quran alone is misguided and an unbeliever. Because they are in the majority, whatever they say is widely accepted to be the true representation of Islam. They assert that one must follow the Quran and also take Hadith as a secondary authority besides God's revelation to be a true believer. According to the Quran, God revealed his message to Moses, David, and Jesus in the Torah, Psalms, and Injil, respectively. Since Islam didn't begin with Muhammad, we need to ask a few questions. 1. Which hadith were used by the followers of previous prophets who delivered revelations before Muhammad? 2. Why is there no reference to the hadiths of previous prophets before Muhammad in the Quran? In my years of encounters with the so-called traditional Muslims, no one has been able to answer these questions. Instead, they try to manipulate verses of the Quran to back their erroneous assertion. They claim the phrase "obey God and His Messenger" means to follow the Quran and the hadith of Muhammad. Had these people been reading the Quran with clear eyes, they would have noticed that previous messengers told their immediate audience to obey them too. We can corroborate from the following verses that different messengers said the same thing to their audience, and none of them ever misinterpreted it to mean following a secondary source. Quran chapter 26 verses 107 to 108, 125 to 126, 145 to 146, 162 to 163, and 178 to 179. Which read, "I am a clear messenger to you. So be aware of God and obey me." There are some other verses they try to manipulate, but thank God the Quran is always there to expose them. There is a video online where the so-called Muslim scholar Mufti Menk twisted a verse to justify the need for hadith. He quoted Quran chapter 59, verse 7. "You may take whatever the messenger gives you, but don't take whatever he withholds you from taking." According to him, these words imply that we must uphold everything and every word spoken by the Prophet as law, refraining from everything he prohibits. A thorough study of the verse shows that the scholar deliberately isolates the words from the context, which has nothing to do with hadith but the sharing of spoils of war. At this point, it became obvious to me how desperate these people could be in their quest to make Muhammad a lawmaker besides God. Now let's settle this issue once and for all using the Quran alone. The Quran exposed the so-called traditional Muslims, but it is so sad that the people can't see this because they are occupied reciting the book in Arabic instead of reading it to comprehend what the book says. In Quran chapter 69 verse 40 and Quran chapter 81 verse 19, God states clearly that the Quran is the saying of Muhammad. Which read, "It is the utterance of a noble messenger." At this point, we need to pause and ask questions. Who are we to believe? God, who said the Quran is the saying of Muhammad, or the so-called traditional Muslims who claim the hearsays collected 2 centuries after the death of the Prophet are his saying? We need to ponder why God calls his revelation the saying of Muhammad. God knew one day the adherents of the book would turn back into idol worship of Muhammad and attribute lies to him as his saying, so he called the Quran the saying of the messenger before them. If the Quran is the saying of Muhammad according to God, why do we need to follow a load of fabrications? God always leaves room to expose people, which is why he is the best planner. What surprises me is that he already uses the word hadith to refer to the Quran, which is the exact word the so-called traditional Muslims chose to call the fabrications they attributed to Muhammad as his saying. Should we call this a coincidence? God called the Quran the saying of Muhammad and also referred to it as hadith. The so-called traditional Muslim scholars and their translators are so clever when translating the Quran. Whenever God refers to the Quran as hadith, they always translate the word to hide the truth from the people. So I am going to leave the word untranslated so you all can see how desperate these people are. Let's take a look at this verse. Quran, chapter 12 verse 111. This is not a fabricated hadith, but an authentication of what came before it, a detailed account of all things, and guidance and mercy for people who believe. In this verse, God made us understand that the Quran is not a fabricated hadith and is a detailed account of all things. God followed up with a very important question in other verses, and every true seeker needs to start asking the so-called traditional Muslims. Quran chapter 7 verse 185. Which hadith after it do they believe in? Quran chapter 77 verse 50. So in which hadith after it do they believe? Quran chapter 45 verse 50. These are God's revelations that we recite to you with truth, so in which hadith other than God and His revelations do they believe? If you are a true believer in God and the Quran, then ask yourself this question to know if you are truthful to yourself. In which hadith other than the Quran do I believe? Now the unbeliever can identify themselves just by answering God's simple question. I know some people will still find it hard to take that bold step to dump everything they do outside the Quran in the name of Islam, even with this amount of proof from the book. The simple things God required of us are listed in the book, so don't blame the Quran if you can't find some of those practices you do ignorantly in the name of following the majority in it. God's instructions are straightforward and precise in the Quran, and He left many things at our discretion, but that doesn't mean we need a volume of books and tasfirs to tell us what to do. Listen to God, not the majority. If you are a true believer, then ponder over these verses. Quran chapter 6 verse 114 reads, Shall I seek other than God as a lawmaker when it is He who has brought down to you the book fully detailed? Quran chapter 6 verse 38 reads, We did not leave anything out of the book. Quran chapter 16 verse 89 reads, We brought the book down to you, providing explanations for all things, guidance, mercy, and news for the submitters. Quran chapter 41 verse 3 reads, A book whose verses have been detailed, an Arabic Quran for people who know. If, after watching this video, you are still not convinced and don't know what to strictly believe in, if you are the type who believes that any hadith that agrees with the Quran should be accepted and if it contradicts the Quran should be rejected, just know that the devil is toying with your brain, and remember that on the day of judgment, you will stand alone to answer your query all alone, and the majority you follow blindly won't be able to save you. Goodbye for now, and God bless you all.